every family it seems to be affected by a disappearance.
For 5 decades, the Assads ruled Syria with an iron fist. First, it was Hafiz al-Assad, then his son Bashar, who carried on the legacy. Now, both regimes were marked by fear and brutality. They crushed dissent using all sorts of techniques: imprisonment, torture, and mass executions. It's been 10 days since the Assad regime fell, and now Syria's mass graves are unearthing a haunting truth.
We've received more than 100 calls about mass graves. People believe that at every military site there are mass graves. The number of people who came out of the prisons is very low, and the number of missing is very large.
More than 150,000 people have vanished in Syria since 2011. They were either detained or arrested or forcibly disappeared. When Assad fled, desperate families rushed to find their loved ones. Their first hope was the prisons. Many prisoners were released, some families were reunited, but the numbers were underwhelming. So the families had to face an uncomfortable truth, that those missing might be dead. This kicked off a search for graves. Since last week, Syrians have discovered 4 major sites, 4 major mass grave sites, all located near the capital, Damascus. You can see them on the map here. The first is Najha. When the teams arrived here, they did not even have to dig. Bones were visible among mounds of earth. Tens of thousands are believed to have been buried here in Najha. It was all done in an organized manner. The bodies would come in freezer trucks accompanied by security vehicles. Once the bodies were unloaded, workers would dig up graves. 5 to 6 bodies would be put in one grave, and then they would put soil over it.
This is an area that we know to have been a mass grave site, where bodies of former detainees from Najha, from elsewhere, had been brought in. When we arrived, we saw trenches that were dug in that hadn't been piled up yet. We saw in some areas human bones scattered that had looked quite old and bleached.
Then there's the city of Qutayfah. It's located around 45 kilometers from Damascus. The second mass grave site was discovered here. The whole place was full of trenches, around 20 feet deep, 10 feet wide, and almost 300 feet long. This site too operated in a similar fashion. From 2012 to 2018, 4 trucks came here twice a week. Each truck carried nearly 150 bodies. Assad's officers oversaw the burial process. Workers say they were forced to flatten bodies using bulldozers. This was done to make them easier to bury.
We've documented this crime occurred. We documented from satellite imagery and from witness testimony that bodies were buried in trenches here at this particular cemetery. But to see it now, one, I think, gives us great reassurance and really corroborates what we know about the machinery of death that was maintained and operated by the Assad regime, certainly throughout the period of the uprising since 2011.
The sites were guarded by special police. No one could go near the sites. They could not even pass the area when the burials happened. Both these sites lay bare the horrifying scale of Assad's killing machine. The numbers are staggering. 60,000 tortured to death, 80,000 confirmed dead. And these are just estimates. The real toll is likely far higher. The Syrian civil war began in 2011. Nearly 500,000 people lost their lives. But the regime's atrocities began decades ago. The extrajudicial killing started under Assad's father. They continued during Bashar al-Assad's rule. These unmarked graves are proof. Experts say they haven't seen anything like this since the Nazis. The question is, what will they do next? The first priority is to secure the graves. Several teams are on the ground doing just that, securing the graves. This includes groups linked to the United Nations, Syria's White Helmets, and other humanitarian groups. They're all going through these graves, documenting everything that they see.
We are calling on international organizations and human rights organizations to come and open these graves so that we can find our children and determine whether they are dead. Where are they? Whose son is this and whose son is that? We don't know.
The second priority is identifying the bodies, and this is going to be a big challenge. Collecting DNA samples, doing forensic documentation, matching the remains with the families who waited for decades. Now Syrians have to process and document this horror. They will need help from global bodies. Their new rulers, the HTS, have promised justice. That's the rebel group that has captured power in Damascus. They are preserving the physical evidence. The HTS says those who committed these atrocities will be punished. But how and when remains unclear. So right now, Syria stands at a crossroads. It must confront the weight of its history, purge its anger and horror as it tries to build a new future.